In this video, we're going to talk about everything you need to know if you're considering buying a condo. This is the ultimate condo buyer's guide, and in the title I put Toronto because that's the market that I specifically work in, but basically 95% of the information I'm giving you in this video is transferable for most markets across Canada. This video will be broken up into 4 categories. Number 1, understanding the market. Number 2, the 9 things that you need to consider throughout the process. Number 3, actually viewing properties. And number 4, the offer process. I'm also going to put timestamps in this video, so if there's one specific thing you want to learn or understand more about, you can go into the description and jump around the video. Just before we go any further, you might be thinking to yourself, who the heck are you and why do you get to tell me about what's going on in the condo market? Well, my name's Tom Storey. I run a real estate team here in the city of Toronto. And in the past 5 years, there's only a handful of people that have sold more condos than our team in downtown Toronto. We've become one of the go-to teams helping people buy condos, getting into the market. And what's been really cool is the people we helped 5-6 years ago are now selling those condos and jumping up to freehold properties. Whether it's CTV, Global News, Toronto Star, the John Oakley Show, I could go on and on. I've been on all those networks trying to give advice on what is actually happening in the condo market. Now that that's out of the way, I just ask one favor for you before we get started here. If you find value in this video, if you could hit that thumbs up button, give this video a like, that would be awesome for the algorithm. Also, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We have a goal to get to 10,000 people by April 1st, and I've got a really cool giveaway I'm going to do, so stay tuned for that. There's going to be a ton of information in this video. So at any point, if you have questions, you can go into the first link in the description. You can book a discovery call with me to go over exactly the answers that you're looking for. Part number 1, what are you buying? Now, when you're buying a condo in Toronto, you're basically going to have 2 different options. You can buy a resale property, and what that means is basically you're buying a used condo from a previous owner. This represents a lot of what people are doing when they get into the market, but you also have another choice. You could also look at the pre-construction condo buying process. And basically what that process looks like is you are buying a property off a floor plan. Typically, it's not going to be ready for a few years. You are going to be paying a premium for this type of property. I've had my views on pre-con versus resale for many years. I go back and forth on it. Currently, as I'm putting out this video, I still strongly believe there is way better value in resale. But sometimes with new construction, if there's like an exact area you want to be in where there's not a lot of condos, there's a view that you're looking for, they only exist in the new construction side of the market. But you do have to understand there are several more fees involved with new construction than resale. The simple process, which we're going to go through in this video, is specifically going to be focused on the resale condo buying process. Then we have to think about what is our money going to get us in the city of Toronto. Now, for the 416 area code of the city of Toronto for buying a condo, typically condo prices are about $1,000 a square foot. Now, some can go up all the way to $2,000 a square foot in Yorkville. Some new construction stuff is already in that price zone. But then, there's some older buildings with higher maintenance fees that you can get for $600 to $800 a square foot. And the further you go away from the core of the city, you can get better price per square foot. So to make the math easy, $500,000, 500 square feet of living space. So that's typically how it's working here. But I want to show you some numbers and show you the last year of data to show you exactly what your money could get you. Okay, so what we're looking at here is the last year of sales volume for the city of Toronto for condos. Now, I want to show you this specific area, sales volume by price range. I think that's really important. So you can basically see that under $300,000, there's really nothing to choose from. There's a small portion of condos between $300,000 and $400,000. If you go to $400,000 to $500,000, you know what I'll do here? I'll actually make this into a table so you can see below. Percentage of the market, this is kind of interesting, right? So if you look right here, 5 to 599 represents about 16% of all sales. Most of the sales are happening from that 6 to 699 bracket, and that's typically going to get you a 600 square foot to 700 square foot property. You also have to think about in these prices, did they have parking? Did they not have parking? That really is something you have to consider. As we keep going here, you can see in different zones that the condo market kind of slows down as you get over 900,000, which makes sense because when you get to that price point, you might think to yourself, well, why don't I just buy a townhouse or potentially a entry-level semi-detached property? The $2 million condo market represents just over 1% of the market. So most of the condo traction is basically happening here. Between $500,000 and $900,000 is where the bulk of condo sales are going to happen. Something else I thought is kind of interesting for you to know if you're considering to buy a condo is that the median sale price. So if all the properties that sold in the last 12 months, we're averaging about 704. If you can see where my mouse is there, the average sale price was 784. And the list to sale price ratio was actually over asking. That's because at the beginning of 2022, we had, a lot of tight market conditions and the inventory was not as high and interest rates were lower and all that kind of stuff. Now let's go over the average and median price over the last year for 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms. So what we're going to do here, we're going to select 1 bedrooms. So you can see where the 1 bedrooms are selling in. Most are that $6 to $699 price point, with a median selling price of $655,000, an average selling price of $671,000, and just over 7,000 sold. If we jump to 2 bedrooms, you're seeing a median sale price of $800,000, an average sale price of just under $900,000. And most 2 bedrooms are basically selling here between $700,000 and $900,000. Still a decent amount in that $6 to $699, but keep in mind, the newer the building is, sometimes these 2 bedrooms can actually be relatively small, where they're packing 2 bedrooms in 600 square foot. So keep that in mind as well. If you are looking for a bigger or quote unquote family size condo, there are 3 bedrooms available. They are kind of all across the board in terms of price point. You're typically going to find these in older buildings, where it's interesting, where the average sale price of 3 bedrooms is higher than 2 beds, but the median sale price is actually lower than 2 beds. So again, it's how many bedrooms are they cramming in the space, not necessarily how much square foot there actually was. The next thing you have to consider is, well, where are these properties located? Where in Toronto could I buy a condo? I find there's like a zone of downtown Toronto that most buyers say to me, here's where we want to buy. But I want to show you here exactly the main areas where the biggest clusters of condos exist. So we're going to jump over to a map here of the city of Toronto. Now, when you see C means central, okay? So our MLS system is made up of C's, which is central Toronto, as you can see here. It's made up of E's, which is East Toronto, and it's made up of W's, which we call West Toronto. If we zoom in a little bit here, what I really want to focus on is, so if you're looking to buy a downtown Toronto condo, you're probably buying in CO1, which basically here you can see it's north all the way to Bloor, south to the water. It is east to Yonge Street and west to basically Dufferin. That's going to give you the biggest cluster of condos. The second biggest cluster of condos is CO8, okay? That is St. Lawrence Market, Distillery District, also north, and it's east to the DVP. CO2 is Annex and Yorkville. C10, there's a big cluster for the Midtown condos. If we keep pulling ourselves all the way down here and get to C14 and C15, that's Bayview Village. This is Newton Brook area and Willowdale. There's also a ton of condos in there. Now, if we zoom out and we go all the way over here to W06, that is New Toronto. That's Mimico. There's a ton of condos being built up, communities here. And they're really cool views if you're facing the water, because you get all the water and you're sometimes looking back at downtown. You can see views of the CN Tower. If we move to the east side, EO1 is Leslieville, EO2 is the beaches. These are mostly areas filled with homes. However, condos do exist. East York, same things. It's mostly going to be freehold. But as condos continue to become more popular with the densification of the city of Toronto, you can basically look all the way around to see what works for you. Now, at this point, you've decided, well, maybe at least thought of the fact of if you're going to buy resale or new construction. You've got a brief understanding on what the prices actually are. You're also thinking about, well, what area would you actually live in? Now, the next decision that you're going to have to make is, do you want something brand new? Do you want that brand new condo that you're walking in and you're not necessarily the first owner, but it's pretty damn new? Or do you want to buy a condo that has a bigger floor plan with more square footage, but it's going to cost you a little bit more on maintenance fees? So you're going to choose now, is it an old building or a new building? Now, I think there's a sweet spot here, and this is just my own personal opinion. I think buildings between like 5 and 15 years old, they're old enough that they become mature, that you know exactly who's living in the building and what the reserve fund is. And if there's any issues or kinks, they've probably been worked out by now, but they're not old enough that there's going to be these massive repairs or special assessments. So in my opinion, I like those buildings 5 to 15 years old. And there's new buildings that are amazing and old buildings that are amazing too, but that's just what I would keep in mind as you're considering your search. Also, the newer the building, typically the smaller the square footage is, but it doesn't mean that the price is less, as these new construction buildings continue to sell at higher prices when they come to the resale market after they register. You know, the people that paid for them are just going to give them away for a lower price. So there's bright and shiny and sexy, these new ones, but they're tight. They're tighter units. These older units are much bigger. However, When you pay your maintenance fees, you pay per square foot. So these older buildings are also going to pay a lot more on the maintenance fee side of things, but these newer buildings, they're great, but they're small. Then you might get to the point that you're thinking, okay, I'm going to start going to realtor.ca or storyteam.ca maybe to check out what is on the market. And you're clicking through these listings and you might see one and go, wow, that's 800 square feet and it's only $650,000. That looks like a great opportunity. Now, in different markets, this will vary. So there are two types of prices you will see when you're looking at condos. You will see offers anytime prices. Now, this is the nice way of buying real estate. This is the price you see is what the seller actually wants. And you might think to yourself, well, Tom, obviously, but when market conditions are tight, and depending on when you are watching this video, that could vary. When market conditions are tight, a lot of sellers, let's say they believe the value of their condo is $750,000, they might actually list it at $599 or $649 and hold an offer date. So sometimes you will see a marketing price. Sometimes you'll see an actual real price. How do you find out what it is? Call your real estate agent, or hey, call me if you want to, and I will tell you what it is. That's kind of the last piece of information that only real estate agents have access to, where the public doesn't see that on the sites. Okay, we're going to wrap up the first segment of this video talking about the numbers that you actually need to know. These are the basic numbers that everyone should know to be an educated buyer going throughout the process of buying a condo. Okay, so what you're looking at here is the Toronto Real Estate Board's Market Watch. This comes out every single month. This is public data, okay? All you have to do is go to Google and type in TRREB, T-R-E-B, Market Watch, and you can get access to this information yourself. Then you're going to have to figure out where you're going to live. So we talked about earlier that CO1 is the area that has the most amount of condos. You can see right here. So you're going to want to know a few things. The first metric you're going to want to know is months of inventory. Now, I've talked about months of inventory on my channel a lot, so I'm not going to bore you with it, but basically it's the best way to understand what the market is actually doing. And to find that number, you're going to take active listings, which is 620, and divide it by 145. What's 620 divided by 145? It's
approximately 4.2758.
Now, in this example, that's going to give us a number over 4. 4 means we are fundamentally in a balanced market, meaning 1 out of every 4 new listings is selling in the first 30 days. That's the absorption rate of what is happening. When it's under 2 months of inventory, that's typically when you see price growth go up. And when it gets to 6 months of inventories, that's typically when we're in a buyer's market. So for the last decade in Toronto, we've hovered between a seller's market and a balanced market for condos, depending on the other fundamentals of the market. So that's the first thing you need to know, but there's a few other things I want you to focus on here. This average list price versus sale price, see how it says 99 over here? I just highlighted it. So that's showing you that for the 145 properties that actually sold, they got 99% of what they're asking for. Now, in heated markets, you see that number being like 105 to 107, where things are going over asking. What that's telling us right now is that for the properties that are actually selling, that 25% of the market in this example, they're getting almost their asking price. And for comparison, if you look just below right here, CO2, 93% of asking. Now, that was only based on 18 sales. That's in Yorkville. So the price points are a whole lot higher as well. But that's really important. Now, the third thing you're going to want to know is the days on market. Now, I tell every single buyer this: days on market is a stat that is subjective, because days on market is only going to calculate the listings that actually sold. So if something's been sitting on the market for 100 days, it's not going to show up in this days on market. So in this example, your average days on market was 28. So of the 145 properties that sold, it averaged 28 days. Now, what does this mean for you as a buyer? What that 28 days means to you as a buyer is that if you see a property that you think you like and it's been sitting on the market over 28 days, it's probably not priced correctly. You can probably negotiate it down. If a property's been on the market for 2 days, the chance of you getting it below the asking price are just less than they would be if it's been sitting on the market longer. Basically, that 28 days in this example is saying that the market has dictated to that listing that it does not believe it is priced correctly, and the seller will either have to hang tight and wait and become basically a listing that's sitting on the market and getting stale, or adjust their pricing accordingly. And that wraps up part 1 of this video. In part 2, we're going to talk about the 9 things you need to know throughout the condo buying process. Here are the 9 things you need to consider when buying a condo and the mistakes to avoid. The first one is setting correct expectations for your search. It's going to sound like a broken record here, but please don't go and see properties unless you have been pre-approved by a bank or a mortgage broker. You should fully understand exactly what you can afford. You can't get on a plane without a plane ticket. I think it's the same thought process. You shouldn't be seeing properties until you know exactly what you can afford. I totally understand. It's fun to just see properties, but for your own benefit and to not waste your own time, you want to know exactly what you can afford before you get out there. Also, setting the expectations for yourself on the future price growth. What I've learned from the last decade of selling real estate here in Toronto is that nobody, not real estate agents, not mortgage brokers, not the economists, nobody can tell you with certainty exactly what is going to happen with housing prices. Obviously, the fundamentals of interest rates, unemployment, and immigration are going to play a big part, but no one's going to know for sure. So if you're buying a property thinking you're just going to hold it for a year and sell it and make this big profit, maybe you will, maybe you won't. But you should be buying it first with the mindset of, are you going to live here minimum for 5 years, or are you at least going to hold it for 5 years minimum? But ideally, I'd like you to say 10 years. The reason I say that is that things change. And it's typically when we don't see them coming, whether that is in a good way or in a bad way, that the market shifts. And you have to keep that long-term perspective. So set correct expectations going into the search, that this isn't like a 1 year flipped, that you're not buying this for 1 year and flipping it. Because if that is what you want to do, I'd probably just tell you at this point, stop watching the video. You shouldn't do that. The second thing to consider is when you're buying into a condominium property, you're going to want to know what percentage of the building is owner occupied versus rented. This is something a lot of people don't actually think about, but I think it's really important, right? And I'm not coming on here saying there's anything wrong with renters. Of course, there's nothing wrong with renters. They're good human beings just like owners. But if you own something, typically, right, for most people, you treat it better than if you rent it. So if you're going to be buying into a building and you're going to be living there for the next 5-10 years, maybe raising a family there or building your career there, whatever you're going to do, knowing that more percentage of the building is owned versus rented is probably something you'd want. So how do you find out what percentage of the building is owned versus rented? Well, sometimes it's in the status certificate, which we will get into more depth on what that is later in this video, but not always perfectly. What I would typically do for our clients is I would look in that building and go like, okay, how many units exist in the building? Like how many total units are there? And I go over the last 2 years and see how many properties rented out and just try and run the math to my best knowledge and say like, hey, it's looking like it's mostly owner occupied, or hey, there's 100 units in this building and 60 of them rented out over the last 2 years. So it's probably a higher volume of renters. The third thing to consider is totally understanding what your condo fees pay for. I hear a lot of people complaining about condo fees, saying, why would I ever buy a condo? I have to pay these maintenance fees as well. Or in the West Coast, you call them strata fees. They basically pay for everything behind the wall. So what are you actually responsible for in your condo? And this is going to depend building by building and by condo management and all that kind of stuff. But typically you're responsible for the HVAC unit. You have to pay to have that repair if anything were to happen. But everything else behind the walls is taken care of by your condo fees. There are some older buildings where everything is included in the condo fees, meaning heat, hydro, electricity, even like cable TV sometimes. But what is tending to happen these days, that sweet spot building range of that 5 to 15 years old, there's a good chance that the fees cover everything except for hydroelectricity, which in a one bedroom would be like, I don't know, $50-$60 a month. A two bedroom, maybe $75 to $80 a month, that you can go from there. And then there's even some brand new buildings where the condo fees cover even less, where they don't cover hydroelectricity and water. So these are all things to think about. All this information will be in the MLS listing that you're viewing. When you're looking at the property, you can ask your realtor, what do the condo fees actually cover? The math that I like to do on condo fees is like, let's say the property is 600 square feet, right? I would typically want the condo fees to be in that 75 to 80 cents per square foot range. That's what I think is typically pretty good. Once they hit about $1 per square foot, that's when, in my opinion, they're getting a little bit high. Also, units with parking and locker, your condo fees are higher. So I've actually seen it sometimes, a parking spot that you own with your property, you're paying $50 a month condo fees just on the parking spot. So if that unit doesn't come with parking, your condo fees would be lower. Same for locker, but we're talking like, I don't know, 10 to 15 bucks a month. Next up is price per square foot. This is one of the first things that we talked about at the intro of this video, but condos in Toronto typically sell per square foot. So 1,000 square feet, if it's $1,000 per square foot, would be $1 million condo. Here's the thing to consider. Price per square foot is an amazing metric. Most websites right now will actually give you the price per square foot. Here's a few things they don't tell you. If there is a long wasted hallway walking into the unit that could have been used for something else, and it's 100 square feet out of a 700 square feet property, I don't necessarily think that price per square foot is better than another one. Just because it has more space doesn't mean it's actually usable space. So I'm more focused on like usable price per square foot. Unfortunately, we can't do that across the board. You have to look at it on a property by property basis. And just like we were talking about condo fees per square foot, right? Price per square foot, you also have to take, well, what's the value of the parking spot and what's the value of the locker? So you'd want to remove that from the price per square foot calculation, where if there's 2 one bedrooms that sell, one sells with parking for 50 grand more than the one without parking. That makes sense because of the value of the parking spot. But you want to do apples to apples. When you start comparing a property that doesn't have parking locker to a property that does, that's when things get a little bit fuzzy. Another interesting thing about price per square foot when buying a condo in Toronto is that typically smaller properties can sell for more per square foot. So you can see a 400 square foot property sometimes sell anywhere from $500,000 to $600,000. And you're like, whoa, that's $1,100, $1,200, $1,300 a square foot. Yes, but it's still staying under that threshold of what people quote unquote deem to be affordable. So even if it's 400 square feet, if it sells for $600,000, someone can still afford that. On the flip side, when you have a 1,300 square foot unit, it doesn't necessarily sell for $1.3 million. It can sometimes sell for a lot less the bigger that it is. Other than when you go to extreme luxury, when you're getting up to penthouses and stuff that are like $4 million, sometimes a penthouse can only be like 2,500 square feet, but sell for $4 million. You're like, wait a sec, shouldn't it be like $1,000 a square foot? On the extreme end of things, it can go higher. On the low end of things, it can go higher. And on the medium to high end of things, it can actually go for a little bit lower per square foot compared to the average. Hey, at this point in the video, if you've been watching this long, I just wanted to say thank you. I'd love for you to comment below if you have any questions at this point of the video. You can also go into the first link in the description. If you are thinking of buying a condo this year, you can book an appointment with me where we'll figure out exactly what makes the most amount of sense for you. The fifth thing to consider is something that I call the wow factor. Okay, when the market is really good, pretty much everything sells. Even the properties that look into the back of a parking lot or don't have a very good layout, in hot markets, they move. Now, when things cool down, and at the time of me making this video, there's 4 months of inventory, which means we're in a balanced condo market, and interest rates have gone up significantly in the past year. The wow factor is super important to me. So what does the wow factor mean? Personally, for me, if you're buying a condo, there should be something that to you or the next potential buyer could be a wow factor. That could be that it's in a really cool boutique loft style building and you have a soft loft, kind of concrete ceilings, or you've got exposed brick or polished concrete, or the view is just phenomenal. You got a view that for the most part is safe and you're not going to lose in the next 5 to 10 years. That could be a wow factor. To me, also, another wow factor could just be like a really, really good floor plan. Like the 2-bedroom split layouts where the bedrooms are on each side. You got the living in the middle. You don't have a lot of wasted space walking in. Those to me are like awesome units. And there's a lot of 1-bedrooms as well, where on the flip side, you got 1-bedrooms that are like these bowling alleys, which I'd say there's nothing wow factor about that. So just to keep that in mind is that markets will shift, things will change, but the properties that have wow factors typically in any type of market, even slow markets, will still sell faster and hold value better than the stuff that is just kind of like everything else. Number 6 is building amenities. Okay, living in a condo can be fun, right? You get all these extra things. It's a community. You got a gym. You got a pool, you got a pet spa, you got a movie room. Some buildings have daycares. It's getting crazy what we're putting in these buildings. Here's what I want you to consider about amenities. How often are you actually going to use them? Not that it's nice to have in your mind, but how often are you actually going to use them? I joke about this all the time with people that buy condos because they're like, oh, they got all these amenities. And I meet with them 5 years later to sell the place for them. And I'm like, did you ever go to the gym? They're like, yeah, twice, but then we joined the good life. And okay, but did you ever use the pool? Yeah, we used it once in the last 5 years. Just remember, you're going to spend 95 to 98% of your time in your unit. Buy for the unit first, and then let the amenities be kind of the secondary thing. Don't buy because the amenities and buy a tiny unit in a building just because it has lots to offer. You're still going to spend the bulk of your time in that property. Also, if there are more amenities, typically maintenance fees are higher. These things are not free. People are going to pay for them. So just keep that in mind with amenities. Personally, if I was going to buy a condo right now, I'd maybe just want like a gym and a party room. Other than that, I wouldn't be interested in any other amenities. Number 7 is unique or boutique versus cookie cutter. So what's a cookie cutter condo? Well, it's a condo tower built by a developer in an area with lots of other condo towers. And you can put me in one unit or another unit, and I'd kind of be like, well, they kind of look the same. There's nothing wrong with cookie cutter condos. They are typically brand new. They have really great views. There can be a lot of great amenities in the building like we just talked about, but they are the same as a lot of other options. And on the flip side, when we talk about the wow factor, there's a lot of lofts in Toronto, whether they're hard lofts or soft lofts. Soft lofts are newer buildings that were built to look like a loft. A hard loft was actually converted from something else. Typically, but not always, these properties sell for a premium, or even in markets that are a bit slower, they still move fairly well because there's more demand for things that are unique versus, oh, I could be in literally 1,500 of these other condos because they're basically the same looking. Number 8 is the developer of the condo. I would do your due diligence on who built the condo. There are a lot of different areas you can go online to learn about developers. What's their reputation? What's their backstory? How many properties have they built before? Do people have good experiences living in them? Even when you're seeing a condo, I find that what gives me the best vibe, and maybe this isn't necessarily about the developer, but like even when the front desk person is like nice and happy and enjoys their job, I just get like a better vibe about the condo. And I've had a lot of times where we're showing condo units and in the elevator, my clients will ask someone in the elevator like, hey, do you like living here? Like get some honest feedback, because the seller's agent is going to tell you how great it is. Not everything is perfect. So I would do some homework on the developer or ask a real estate agent who the developer is, what their background is, and if there's anything you'd have to be worried about. And to wrap up part number 2 of this video, number 9 is please, please, please work with someone that understands the condo market. I'm not saying you have to call me, okay? If you have a relationship with another real estate agent, that's okay. But there's been so many times where I get offers on my condo listings from an agent that has no idea what they're doing. They know nothing about the area. They call you beforehand. They're like, where do I park? How do I get into this building? You know, which way do I go when I walk out of the elevator? I'm like, do your own research. Like someone's paying you to work for them. So please, 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 whoever you work with, just make sure they have some type of experience in the area, in this type of property. Another thing as well, like over the years, some of the best prices I've gotten for my properties, for my sellers, have been from agents that don't know them that well or from out of town. So although that was good for my seller, personally, I think a lot of those buyers may have overpaid because they were getting the wrong advice. So yes, lots of people have real estate licenses, but I think that there is a massive difference between having a real estate license and actually being a professional real estate agent that is giving people good advice. That wraps up part number 2 of this video. Let's get into the actual viewing of the properties, the mindset that you have to have. That's part number 3. And you're ready to view some properties. So viewing properties when you're buying a condo for yourself. Unfortunately, I have to tell you this. It is not like selling Sunset. It is not like any HGTV show. The real estate agent doesn't do this fancy big party and walk around and be like, look at this granite countertop. That's not how this works. Your gut feeling, I can almost tell from my clients and myself when I buy properties, in that first 30 seconds, you are going to know, is this the place? Are you getting a good vibe? Are you getting a bad vibe? Obviously, do your due diligence, open the cupboards, look around, check through everything. But I find that our clients know right away from that gut feeling. If you have a real estate agent showing you properties that is trying to sell you on it, that's an issue. If it's a piece of crap, they should tell you, this property is a piece of crap. Let's go see the next one. If it's something you really like, that's when you can turn to them and go, what do I need to know about this property? And as you're going out to see properties, as we talked about at the beginning of this video, you're going to want to be pre-approved at this point. Okay, so you're pre-approved. You know that you got to think that you're going to have a gut feeling when you walk in if it's going to be the right place or not. You're also going to need 5%, give or take 5%, of the amount of money you're going to spend liquid in your bank account. This is the deposit for the property. So it's not your full down payment, but it is the deposit. In the city of Toronto, when you're buying a condo, typically the deposit is about 5%. So if you get an offer accepted, even with conditions, the deposit is typically due within 24 hours of getting that offer accepted. So make sure that if you have that money in mutual funds or TFSA or wherever you're taking a fund, make sure it's available and accessible, because you might need it. That then takes me to my next point, the total down payment. How much should you be putting down? Now, this is where you're going to want to talk to a mortgage broker, because there's 2 types of mortgages there. because there's two types of mortgages. There's uninsured mortgages, which means you're putting over 20% of the purchase price. And there's insured mortgages, which means you're putting under 20% of the purchase price. Now, there are minimum thresholds in Canada when buying properties. You can put 5% down up to $500,000. But once you go over $500,000 to $999,999, you have to put 10% on that money. Let's say, for instance, you bought a property worth $600,000. Minimum, you have to put 5% on the first $500,000, which would be $25,000. And then on that $500,000 to $600,000, that $100,000 segment, minimum, you have to put 10% on that. So 25 plus 10, your minimum down payment allowed for this $600,000 property would be $35,000. If you are one of the few people that's buying a condo over $1 million, once you go over $1 million for any property type across Canada, you have to put 20% down. It's not like 5%, 10%, and then 20 only over $1 million. If you go over $1 million, it's 20% on the entire purchase price. Okay, so now you're in a property and you're trying to decide, do I actually like this property? You're getting that gut feeling and you're thinking like, what should I do? What you should focus on now are the things you cannot change. What can you not change? You can't change the neighborhood it's located in. You can't really change the floor plan unless you're going to knock down a wall with the approval of the condo board, by the way. Those are things you can't change. What can you change? Well, you can change the kitchen backsplash. You could change the flooring. You could add a kitchen island. So focus on the things you can't change because that's never changing, right? You can't really change the floor plan. It's either going to have a good floor plan or a bad floor plan. If you like more things that you can't change versus not liking things that you can change, then I'd say it's a property you may want to consider making an offer on. We have something that we call the out of 10 rule that we talk to most of our buyers about. And I'd actually say if there's one thing you're going to remember from this video or write down, it would be this out of 10 rule. Okay. I can't give you any math behind this. I can just tell you that our clients over the years when buying properties have never come back to me after the fact and said, oh, I really regret that decision. And I think a big part of it is because we tell them about the out of 10 rule. So what does this mean? Well, it means when you go into a property, whether you're buying for yourself or with your partner, you want to rank it on a scale of 1 to 10. And that sounds kind of obvious, right? The caveat is this. You are not allowed to choose number 7. It cannot be a 7 out of 10 because 7 out of 10, in my opinion, is average. Why do you want to feel average about something you're likely spending a lot of money on? It's something that's going to be one of the biggest purchases you ever make in your life. You shouldn't feel average about it. So what that's going to force you to do is rank the property either a 6 or below, which in my opinion means move on. It's not the right place for you. Or it's an 8, a 9, or a 10. Now, if it's a 10, there's a good chance you're going to want to make an offer on a property. If there's a 9, there's still a pretty good chance you're maybe going to want to make an offer and see what happens. If it's an 8, here's what I want you to ask yourself. For the things that you can change, like we just discussed, if it's an 8 right now, but you change the kitchen backsplash, you paint it the color that you want, you bring in your art, you bring in your couch, you put your furniture in the property, does it become a 9? Only make offers on properties that are 8, 9s, or 10s. The out of 10 rule sounds corny, but I promise you it is extremely important throughout your search. The last thing you need to consider throughout this process of actually viewing the properties is when you make the offer and you get it accepted, and we'll get to that part of the video in a second here, is you're going to have to know your additional costs involved. So there's 2 additional costs involved that are not the deposit or the down payment. It is the land transfer tax. Now, in Toronto, we pay 2 land transfer taxes. We pay municipal and we pay provincial. There are great land transfer tax calculators all over the internet. There's one on my website. I will link that in the bio as well. That land transfer tax, okay, it is cash on closing. Okay, it cannot be put into the mortgage. So when you meet with that lawyer at the end, you're going to give them a check for the rest of your down payment because you've already given your deposit. You're going to give them another check. Well, not another check, but it's going to be in the main check for the land transfer tax and a check for the lawyer fees. So land transfer tax and lawyer fees are going to be the 2 other things you're going to have to keep in mind that are cash on closing. The biggest one is going to be the land transfer tax. If you are a first-time home buyer watching this video, yes, you will get a rebate on the land transfer tax. However, if you're buying a property over $600,000, you're going to get the max rebate, which is $8,475. It's called a rebate, but it's not like you pay it and get it back. It's just taken off the top. However, you're still going to have to pay a portion of land transfer tax. Like I said, go to the calculator, type in your purchase price, and it'll show you exactly what that amount would be. We've made it to part 4 of the video. Congratulations if you've made it this far. Seriously, I mean it. I hope you've been finding this video valuable. By the way, if you found it valuable, I'd love if you could comment below or throw a like on this video. That would be awesome. So we're at the point now that we've educated ourselves, okay? We know what to expect. We know all the things that we need to know going into this process. We've seen properties and we are ready to make an offer. Now, I'd say there's 5 things that are extremely important about making an offer. Let's call them the big 5. You got the price you're going to offer, right? Now, how are you going to figure out what that price is going to be? Well, your real estate agent is going to look over comparable sales, look over days on market, and come to a conclusion on the strategy of what you're going to bid on the property. Are you going a little bit lower because you know it's been sitting there for a little while and see how the seller reacts? Are you going to go in closer to asking price because you really want this property and maybe there's competition? Or in some cases, when the property is listed low and has an offer date on purpose, you're going over the asking price, even though it doesn't necessarily mean you're going more than it's worth. It's just it was listed lower than it should have been anyways. Okay, so the big 5 are price. We talked about that. The deposit, we've talked about that. That is typically 5% of the purchase price. Closing date, the possession date. When are you actually going to get the keys for this property? Number 4 is something called irrevocable. Irrevocable essentially means how long is the offer valid until. If you send this offer at 6 p.m. on a Thursday evening, how long are you going to give the seller to make a decision on your offer? The decision they could make is either say no, they could say yes, or they could counter the offer back to you, where they change something in the offer and counter it back to you. Each time an offer goes back and forth, typically that irrevocable time has been changed. So that time is very, very important, because if you do not get to an offer by a certain period of time, it's dead. It's no longer a valid legal offer. And number 5 is probably the most important: conditions. Most condo offers have some type of conditions in them. And even if they're firm offers when the market's hot, it just means you did your condition homework before instead of after. Now, there's 2 main conditions that I typically see in the offers that we get on our condo listings and the offers that we make for our condo buyers. Number 1 is the financing condition. A typical financing condition here in the city of Toronto is anywhere from 3 to 5 business days. That is the period of time in which the bank or your mortgage broker is getting everything together for you to finance and close on the property. These conditions are written specifically in a way where at the end of these conditions, if you're working with a real estate agent that knows what they're doing, it will say to the buyer's satisfaction. So if you are not satisfied with the financing that you got, you could request a mutual release and get your deposit back. Now, the deposit to get back typically takes up to 10 business days, so keep that in mind. But it's not like you're stuck in this thing. It depends how you write these conditions. So financing is the big one. The other one that you see in basically every single offer for a condo is the condition of status certificate review. Now, a status certificate is a 250-page to 350-page document, which is PDF these days. Thank God. I remember the days where I go to management offices and pick up these big-ass packages. So basically, what's in the status? Well, it's everything you need to know about this condo. It is the rule book. It's the guidebook. It's the prayer book. It's massive. How much money is in the reserve fund? Is there any liens on the property in which you are purchasing? Is the current owner on that property up to date with all their payments? Is there any potential special assessments coming in the building in the future that you would have to be made aware of? And is there any ongoing lawsuits? There's typically a few lawsuits on most statuses that I look at. A lot of them are slip and fall lawsuits. But if there's something big, your lawyer will let you know. Now, who has the right to give you feedback on this status certificate? The only person who should be giving you feedback is a real estate lawyer. Yes, real estate agents could technically review them. I can walk through a status and know exactly what I'm looking at and give information on it. However, if I tell you something wrong, I'm on the hook. Most smart real estate agents will not give their opinion on the status certificate. They will have a real estate lawyer review it. The lawyer will give their opinion, and if there are red flags, you can back out of the deal. I'd say for the most part over my career, when a property comes in and it gets sold conditional, where you agree on price, but there's still conditions, probably 95% of them turn into a firm sale anyways, but that is extremely important. At this point, you might be asking yourself, well, do you do inspections on condos? Yes and no. If the building's really old, yeah, if you can get an inspection condition in there, by all means, do your thing. If they're a newer building, what you want to keep in mind is that a condo inspection is going to cost you as a buyer like $400 to $500. Typically, if they find any issues, it's going to be behind the walls, which is covered by maintenance fees anyways. So I'd say like less than 5% of the offers we've ever received over my career actually have an inspection condition for a condo. However, they do exist, but financing and status certificate review are the ones that are the most prevalent. Okay, now let's get to the part where you've got an accepted offer, right? It's now a firm offer. Congratulations, you've bought a property. It's pretty damn exciting. What's next? Well, the weird thing is it goes kind of quiet for a little bit because you've done all that searching. You go out and see properties, you make offers, but you get one accepted. You've given your deposit. You've sent all the paperwork to the lawyer. Well, your real estate agent will typically do that for you. And now it's a waiting game. Whatever date you put as your possession date will be the date you actually get the keys. Now, a typical possession here in the city of Toronto is anywhere from 45 to 60 days. They could be a little bit earlier than that or a little bit later, but that's around the zone we usually see them happen. During this time frame, it's really you chat with the lawyer, you set up a meeting with the lawyer about a week or 2 weeks before the closing date to transfer the rest of the funds and sign all the paperwork and all that fun legal stuff. But what typically you got to remember too is that during this time, you're going to want to set up your utilities at the new place. You're going to want to talk to condo management and book the elevator because there's some dates that are blocked off that you can't book the elevator. So you're going to want to know exactly what date you're actually going to want to move into the property. Obviously, at this point, you're going to talk to the moving company and everything like that as well. It's also typical in your offer, you would have had a clause that you got 2 or 3 purchasers visits. Now, 2 is the one I see most common. And that means is between the moment that the offer got accepted or the offer has firmed up to the closing date, you can go back to the property twice. That's typically what we see. Now, what do you do when you go back to the property? Is you do final measurements. Maybe you bring your family to show them the property that you bought. You do all that kind of fun stuff. Not everyone uses both visits, but a lot of buyers do. So just keep in mind that you can go back to see it after the fact. Pretty much every offer will have that type of clause in there. And then you get to the closing day. So what happens on closing days? Well, typically here in the city of Toronto, it's maybe different in other areas, but Toronto real estate lawyers, typically these transactions close anywhere from like 2 to 5 p.m. Okay, so that's why you might want a closing on a Monday, a Tuesday, a Wednesday, not a Friday. Because if there's any hiccup on a Friday, it's going to push it to the Monday, right? Because lawyers actually have reasonable working hours, not like us silly realtors that work all the time. So you might want to do the closing date earlier in the week just to keep that in mind. You cannot close on a weekend and you cannot close on a holiday. That's something your realtor will tell you throughout the process as well when you're putting the dates in there. And then you're going to get an email or a call from your lawyer saying the funds have been transferred. Congratulations, you now own a property. And that is a pretty cool feeling. I can still remember the first condo I bought like 8 years ago now. I felt like I had accomplished something that I've been working so hard for so long. And that condo kind of propelled my love for real estate and doing what I do and building up the property ladder. Now I build an entire real estate portfolio, but it all started from that first property. That's it. That's the ultimate condo buyer's guide. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you made this to the end, honestly, congratulations. You are educated. You know what's going on. You're probably going to go out there and make a better decision than someone that didn't watch this video. I honestly do think this. I've been through this hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times with buyers that our team has helped, and we know what we're doing here. So I hope you found some value in that. If there's any questions that you have at all, throw them in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching this video. My name is Tom Storey. I run a real estate team here in the city of Toronto. And remember, home is where your story begins.